there's always this idea like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do something in the backyard, or I want to create that, or we should go on this trip because it would be like this. And this desire to create beauty. A lot of times men will be like, that's going to cost too much. I have all these other things I'm thinking about. No. Or that's going to be dangerous. No. Or that's just not good. And it's so helpful and beautiful when men do this. And I think innately, women really, really want this. I just think that what women also want is to be heard and considered. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack here, and today is January 1st. So, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you've had a blessed New Year's. I love New Year's as a Russian American person. We always say how you spend your New Year is how you will spend the rest of the year. So, wishing everyone all the best. Let's get into it. There are a couple of concepts that I wanted to talk about and see how they fit together. And so let's see how far I get. But what I really want to get into right now is number one, how attractive it is when a woman hears no from a man, and how deeply and innately she yearns for that no and for that instruction and for that direction. Because somewhere deep down we know that it goes hand in hand with the accountability and responsibility that a man has for the woman in question. Now, that is an innate knowing consciously within our society. I don't think a lot of people get that. And I don't think a lot of women these days are receptive to that because their masculine is so over-indexed in their systems, right? They're so hyper masculine that they don't have the receptivity towards that, right? They think they're the ones that need to be calling the shots and that need to be doing all the direction and all the controlling, right? Because for women, it does become a bit controlling because there's a deep, deep fear that something's not going to work out. Whereas what women don't recognize is what they're missing is accountability. So it's an interesting dynamic with some nuances, of course. Foundationally, masculinity and accountability go together. Like foundationally, women are not actually very accountable. Um, and men absolutely are. And so I think it's one of those like with great power comes great responsibility. There is, with the great responsibility, right? With the power, there is that responsibility to protect and guide. And it's all coming from this really, really benevolent place of wanting to provide safety and protection and provision for it and the well-being of those that are in your community, in your circle. And this is something I just love, love, love about men. They're so accountable to the well-being of those that they love, not only those that they love, like strangers as well, right? Because who performs the most bystander rescues? It's not women, it's men, right? Men are the ones that are jumping into bodies of water, saving people. Um, and it's because of this innate accountability for the well-being of others, right? And what I know about men is that when they feel appreciated in that, that only grows. And there's a little bit of a teaching here is that there's this understanding of the word duty, right, for men. So it means to provide for others. So it's this unspoken accountability that men have. And there's like a lot of positive pressure in it, but it quickly becomes a burden if the people that are around you don't appreciate it, don't see it, or worse, like demean it, or don't give you the tools you need to perform the duty, right? I feel like so much these days is like men have this need, this innate need still to be that accountable, to be that responsible, but it's like one hand is tied behind their back. It's they can't do it, right? Because you cannot provide this for someone that's not receptive to it and doesn't see what's actually going on. And so there are a couple of different teachings around this. And there's a foundational reason I believe that accountability is so much a masculine foundational trait, attribute, is because accountability goes so in sync with honor. Honor is such an interesting word. You watch all those like, Rob Roy, Gladiator, you watch all those movies like there's the whole thing is about honor. Everything is about honor. Um, I said I was going to go back for my family. Like I won't let this evil person, you know, take advantage of me and my people. Like there's so much honor and honor like to the death. I will be honorable like even if I am killed in the process. Like I will never not be honorable. And honor is such an interesting thing because it makes sense how men they're not really focused on the small minutia, the details, the feelings that come up throughout any given situation. They have a commitment, they're honorable towards that commitment, they will accomplish it and they will achieve it. So I think women, we don't have this in our psyche, in our dynamic. And that's not a bad thing. It's just it's a masculine thing. Women have other things that are not masculine things, and that's totally fine. And so there's a couple of great examples about this. And I think there's something to also the fact that I was listening to, who was it? Oh my gosh, it was Jordan Peterson's Taylor suit maker. He had a great interview on trigonometry this week. And he was talking about, he was asking the question, would we follow a woman into war? There was a long conversation about it. And foundationally, the answer is no, because women are not as innately present to the idea of death as men are. Evolutionarily, when tribes were warring, the men would be killed, but the women would never be killed. They would be taken captive or they would be, continue to live and procreate with the other tribe. Not ideal, not amazing, but also not death. And I think this is a foundational difference that men and women have. And so there's something to that. And there's some honor and reverence that I feel should be just given to men for that. It's a big deal. That's major. We're all so comfortable in our perfect little computerized societies where we don't notice, we don't realize the real sex differences that matter, right? It's only when, shit hits the fan and things aren't working and there's a big problem, there's a flood, there's something we call men, right? And I just think that it's because of that foundational accountability that is linked with honor. And so there are a couple of interesting examples. So that gets down into the nuance around trust and accountability and how men and women kind of misunderstand that with each other. And there, it should be this really beautiful loop of trust and accountability, and then masculine accountability grows, and it's positive pressure because he feels like he's being trusted, respected, uh, understood for what he's doing. But that doesn't happen a lot these days because I think women are foundationally just not privy to masculinity and the way the masculine brain works. And gosh, I just think we also just we don't teach this and there's just so many things, but I digress. So, just a quick little example. Accountability. A couple of different examples. So, I talked about bystander rescues, right? And I this is another example of honor, I think. So, I was watching this film yesterday called Ironia Судьбы, which is a Soviet film from the 70s. It translates to Irony of Fate. It's like a classic film. Most, people that have Soviet roots, Soviet ties watch it like every single year. It's a tradition to watch it on the 31st of December, right before New Year's. It's a New Year's movie. I'm going to go on a little tangent and just share about this because I love it so much. But you have to understand about this movie that during this era in the 70s of Soviet Union, what they were doing was all of the little suburbs near all of the big cities, they were effectively building them the exact same way. Same buildings, same structures, same streets, same street names, same apartments, same apartment furniture. The idea was so every comrade will feel like they're at home no matter what city they are in. Anyway, So this movie is a beautiful film. You guys should watch it. But effectively, this one man named Evgeny in Moscow, he has this tradition, which a lot of Russian people do. They go to the sauna, the spa. They go to the bathhouse. Every 31st of December, you wash yourself before the new year. And him and his friends got super drunk. And there was this one man that was supposed to fly to St. Petersburg, Leningrad at the time. And they got so drunk, I couldn't remember who it was. And so they put this guy, Evgeny, on the plane. So drunk throughout the whole flight, he didn't even recognize where he was. He landed at the airport. He was sitting in the airport in St. Petersburg already when he kind of realized, oh, wow, it's time to wake up. He thinks he's in Moscow. And so he gets a taxi home. He says his address. He goes home. He opens the door of the building and he gets in bed. The funniest thing ever, of course. He's not in Moscow. He's now in St. Petersburg, but the key worked because of this understanding that they built cities in the same way. And this woman comes in and it's a hilarious thing. And, love story, New Year's Eve, really fun, really big comedy as well. It's just such a fun movie. And I laugh the whole time and then I cry, and then I laugh, and then it's great. But one of the things that I heard in the movie when I was watching it yesterday that I kind of missed in prior times watching it was when he was telling this woman that he had met that he had proposed once before in his life to a woman who his best friend was also interested in. And the woman chose his best friend. And the woman that he was talking to said, are you still friends with him? And he says, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be? It's not his fault she chose him. That's masculine honor, loyalty, like this ability to see things in this really rational, factual way that is just true. And it's so, so beautiful for all of us, right? And men do this when they're seeing the big picture of what's important for their families and the people they love and what they're doing, to the point where if there is a desire or an idea that comes into their space, right? Their partner, their wife, their kids, they ask him something like, "Oh, I really want to do this," or "I really want to do that." And they know that it's not going to be good for their overall well-being, their overall protection, whether it be financial, physical, emotional, spiritual, you name it, right? They're going to say no. And they do have their blinders on in those circumstances, right? Because what they're doing is so good, but they say no. And a lot of times the especially the feminine, the female, the one with the idea, feels hurt and disregarded and just pushed aside, right? Because her idea, it feels like she's being denied as opposed to the idea is being denied. Because for women, remember, one of the things about femininity that is really a driving factor is this desire to create beauty. Like in any given situation, women are just, I've talked about this before, we're just obsessed with like making things beautiful. And I think that's a great thing. That's a beautiful trait. That's a feminine trait, right? So the women that have a really overdeveloped masculine energy, they're not going to exhibit a lot of these types of things. And that's what I think men should be worried about. But I digress. So there's always this idea like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do something in the backyard, or I want to create that, or we should go on this trip because it would be like this. And this desire to create beauty, whether it's going to Paris because that's going to be beautiful, or something with relationships, or something in the home, right? So doing something in the backyard. And a lot of times men will be like, that's going to cost too much. I have all these other things I'm thinking about. No, or that's going to be dangerous. No, or that's just not good. Um, and it's so helpful and beautiful when men do this. And I think innately, women really, really want this. I just think that what women also want is to be heard and considered, right? To be truly, truly heard and considered. And I think that if men are able to do that for women, women are then also are able to kind of say like, okay, you have the veto power, right? One of a good friend of mine who watched my video on the perception that men lack concern, right? Which is the furthest thing from the truth. She told me something that was really fun to hear. She said, the sexiest thing my husband did this year, like hands down, the whole year, was he booked a room in the library with a whiteboard for 3 hours and he brought me in to the planning session for like our next year. And he heard me out. He had me write down all of my thoughts and all of the things I'm focused on and worried about on this whiteboard. He then prioritized that with me and he really listened to everything that I said about all of the things that he was thinking. And some of the things he said, okay, but a lot of the things he said, no, and here's why. And this was so attractive for her because it is just foundational in him really leading this relationship and him and his accountability. And because he heard her, he didn't just do it on his own. She felt included, she felt considered, she felt connected. And this is just deeply, deeply what women want, right? We really want that. We want to feel connected. We want our feelings matter, right? That's our gold star is our feelings and our connection and our relationship. Whereas for men, the gold star is like, the effectiveness and the provision and the protection and like, is everyone good? Is everyone cared for? And it's an amazingly beautiful thing. So I loved when she shared that with me because I just thought that was so special. And it just goes to show what's possible, right? And in the past, maybe he hadn't considered her, right? One of the things that I've heard somebody say, was it Allison Armstrong? This idea that men always have a plan, but it's always like news to women. Men are always like totally have this like very clear big picture plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. They have this plan and but the women in their lives don't know about it. I've heard so many men actually tell me this that, I knew I was going to quit my job and I knew I was going to do this and I had this 5-year plan, but I forgot to tell my wife about it. I forgot to bring her into it because I was just so focused on making this happen. And I think it was Alison Armstrong that has some teaching about like because within like masculine building and creation, there's this idea of like keep the plan to yourself so that, you make sure that it happens. No one, messes with your plan. No one toils your plan. And so there is that innate kind of like, okay, if I can just keep this to myself, then it'll happen. I'll make it happen. But you want to bring your partner into the plan. I think that's so important. And for me, it's like, I just want my thoughts to be considered. Ultimately, I believe that the man has the veto power as the one that is accountable, right? Because like I said at the beginning of this video, accountability is such an innately masculine thing because men are accountable to the nth degree, like all the way. And there are so many little examples about how accountable men are because of their honor and how they won't just not do something because they don't feel like it anymore. With women, there's so many beautiful things to say about women, and y'all know I have a lot of beautiful things to say about women. I always do. Um, but one of the things about women that is maybe not as in integrity, because it's not a masculine trait, right? We don't have that. But this idea that if I'm meant to do a favor for my friend, um, but we're not speaking, or there was a fight, or something just wasn't right, I would have this desire to not do the favor. I would have this desire to kind of say, "Can you ask someone else?" Or I would have that drive, and I think she would too. She would probably go ahead and ask someone else because she would expect that I wouldn't want to. And men aren't like that. It wouldn't even occur to them to not do something they said that they were going to do, no matter who's mad, no matter how bad it was, no matter what. They just show up. They really just show up. And it's so special about men. Like, I remember I was like it was like a class at a gym that I was at. There was this like special holiday class where it was a relay race of like circuit training. It was men and women. And I don't know if they planned it properly because it ended up being really long, but regardless, about an hour in to all of this, literally you could just look at this. You could just videotape this. The women are done. They are talking. They are not finishing, right? They were not going to finish this relay race. They were just done. Whenever they felt like they were done, they had enough, they had enough. The men were they were going to stay there all night until it was done. And that's something so magical about men. It's just so magical about men. It's something that they teach us, right? The people that I've learned resourcefulness from was men. The people that I've learned those types of things from was men. And so it's a beautiful thing. So what's happening is that women have been overdeveloping these masculine traits over the last many decades, of course, because there's the narrative that has pushed that masculinity is what creates success and success is what creates your worth. And so they've been overdeveloping like resourcefulness and capability and decisiveness and self-sufficiency and aggressiveness, right? But all of that is getting developed in women, like that masculine, those masculine aspects. But because women don't have the loyalty and the honor and the teamwork and that accountability that goes with all of that, these qualities become very hyper individualistic. And what they end up doing is that they create a proving energy. It creates this proving energy that is the opposite of masculine camaraderie, right? So it creates this distance, it creates this frustration, I think, for men, especially in those larger corporate work environments, because I think, like, if a man was behaving that way, he had all of those traits, but he didn't have loyalty and honor and teamwork and accountability. They would say, we don't want this person on our team, right? They would feel that out. They would sniff that out, and that wouldn't be a great masculine man, right? So in women, it's not a great masculine woman either, because she's missing these foundational benevolent attributes that are so, so important to understand. And so, because she's developed all of these traits, there is this idea that women need to call the shots, or she should be able to call the shots. And, you know, she never creates the space and the opportunity to be receptive to a man's no, because she feels like she should be the one providing that. And kind of closing the loop, what's not realized and what is obviously missed is that the no is in direct relationship with accountability and responsibility and all of the things she's actually craving to be safe and to be attracted to her man, right? And so she's in this like self-fulfilling prophecy where she's not getting anything that she actually really wants. And it's a lot of women are waking up to this. So many women are waking up to this, and I think it's great. And it's just so, so important to understand this notion of veto power and a man's no, and how important that is, and how it goes hand in hand with his desire to care for the well-being of those that he loves. And the no comes from this greater knowing of what's going to make sure that that people are safe, right? And so I think that a woman is blind to that if she's not in her feminine and her receptive space. And I also think she can become really blind to it if she feels that she's not being heard, like I was talking about earlier. If she feels like she's just a trophy or something on just something that is not a foundational counterpart in the relationship, right? So there are a lot of nuances here, and there are also a lot of relational dynamics that people are dealing with on a very personal basis. But this is just kind of a beginning to this understanding of masculine accountability and the power of the no, and how the no is the masculine's way of protecting. And when a woman feels really understood and seen, the no is, it's like, thank you, right? I know I was on with Courtney a couple of episodes ago, and she talked about how she got in an accident with she got in an accident driving her car, and then her husband, basically her husband, her boyfriend, kind of created this new thing where she was not to drive at after a certain time and a certain distance, right? He put his no down. He said, "Nope, you're not doing that." And it felt so good for her and so loving and so caring, right? That is so loving and caring from the masculine. And it's something that is just amazing. And so hopefully, the more and more women start to wake up to this, we can keep having these conversations. So until the next one, if you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things: either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.